Don't forget to like the video, share your thoughts or story in the comments and subscribe to our latest stories. Before I start, tell me where you are watching me from. I wonder which cities and towns will join me in this memory that will follow me for years. I can still remember that day so clearly, even though it happened over a decade ago. The sky was a dull grey, the kind that makes everything feel heavier than it actually is, and the wind had this soft, almost playful tug at the edges of my scarf as I stepped out of my car. My family had tried to reassure me all morning, their voices calm, patient, even overly confident. "Don't worry, everything will be fine," they kept saying, almost like a mantra. But inside me, a storm was already brewing. I had this gnawing feeling I couldn't shake, a quiet alarm that whispered, "something's off." My sister, Marianne, was the first to greet me at the front door of our childhood home. She hugged me tightly, but I could feel the tension in her shoulders. "We're all here," she said softly, as if trying to convince herself as much as me. My father's smile was steady but reserved, the kind of smile you give when you don't want to show how worried you really are. My mother, as usual, was bustling around the kitchen, putting the finishing touches on her famous chicken salad, humming a tune I didn't recognize. She had that unshakable optimism, the one that could make any catastrophe seem like a minor inconvenience. "Relax, dear," she said, wiping her hands on her apron. "Everything's going to work out." I wanted to believe them. I wanted to feel that warmth, that sense of security I had grown up with. But every instinct in my body said something was wrong, and no amount of chicken salad or cheerful humming could quiet it. I tried to make small talk, laughing a little too loudly at a joke my father made about the old oak tree in the backyard, but my eyes kept darting around, searching for some sign that things were really okay. By late morning, the air had shifted. The sky, still grey, seemed heavier, almost oppressive, and the house felt quieter than usual. My nephew, Jamie, was playing with his toy trains in the living room, blissfully unaware of the tension hovering just above the floor. I watched him for a moment, marveling at his innocence, wishing for a fraction of that peace for myself. My sister noticed my gaze and sat down beside me on the worn leather couch. "Are you okay?" she asked gently. I forced a smile. "I'm fine. Really?" She didn't look convinced, but she didn't press. Instead, she reached out and took my hand, giving it a light squeeze. Her eyes, those familiar green eyes I had always trusted, met mine with an unspoken understanding. "It's going to be all right," she said, echoing the mantra that had been repeated all morning. The first sign that my worry wasn't entirely unfounded came when the phone rang just after noon. My mother answered, her voice cheerful at first, but there was a flicker of something, concern, perhaps underneath the tone. I couldn't hear the other side of the conversation, but I could see it in her eyes. That tiny shift, a micro-expression that most people would miss, made my chest tighten. Something was happening, and it wasn't what we had all hoped for. My father was the first to take control, moving with a quiet decisiveness that both reassured and unsettled me. He made a few calls, pacing the length of the hallway, muttering dates and numbers under his breath. My sister and I watched him, the gravity of the situation settling over us like a cold blanket. My mother tried to keep the kitchen alive with small talk and iced tea, but even she seemed subdued now. Hours passed, and the waiting became unbearable. I found myself walking through the house, touching the familiar surfaces, the staircase banister that my father had polished every weekend, the kitchen counter with its small chips and scratches, reminders of years gone by. Each touch felt like an anchor, grounding me in the reality I knew, even as my mind spun out in possibilities and fears. When my father finally returned to the living room, there was a quiet tension in his step. He sat down beside me, his large hands clasped together tightly. "We've done everything we can for now," he said, his voice calm but firm. "The rest is out of our hands." I wanted to nod, to take comfort in his words, but I couldn't. The gnawing feeling inside me had only grown stronger. My heart was pounding, my stomach a knot of nerves I couldn't untangle. I found myself looking around the room, taking in the faces of my family, their efforts to reassure me, their subtle signs of their own worry, and I realized something important. We were all in this together. Sitting there, surrounded by the people I loved most, I felt the first stirrings of a quiet, resolute determination. Yes, worry still lingered, but it was no longer alone. It was accompanied by a deep, unspoken bond with the people who mattered most. I didn't know exactly what would happen next, but I knew I wouldn't face it by myself. As evening settled in, the light through the windows softened, casting the room in warm amber tones. My nephew had fallen asleep on the couch, and the house, though still heavy with anticipation, felt a little safer. I sat back, taking a slow, steadying breath. My family's words "don't worry" hadn't erased my fear, but they had reminded me of something far more important: the power of connection, of shared strength, and of standing together even when the world feels uncertain. And in that moment, for the first time that day, I allowed myself to believe that maybe, just maybe, things could be okay. The storm hadn't passed, not entirely, but I felt the beginnings of a calm inside me, the kind that only comes when you realize you're not alone. And that was enough, for now. By the time night fell, the house had grown quiet, the kind of quiet that feels heavy and almost alive, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. I stayed in the living room, curled into the corner of the sofa with a soft blanket draped over my shoulders. My eyes kept wandering to the window, watching the shadows of the trees stretch long and thin across the yard. Each creak of the floorboards, each faint whisper of the wind, made my stomach twist tighter. Even though my family had done everything they could to calm me, the gnawing unease had not left. It had simply taken up a quiet residence inside me, waiting, observing. My sister, Marianne, joined me after a while, carrying 2 mugs of tea. She set one in front of me and sat down beside me, letting out a long, slow sigh that I could feel more than hear. "I hate seeing you like this," she admitted softly, stirring her own tea absent-mindedly. "I know they keep telling you not to worry, but I get it." I gave a small, tired smile. "Thanks," I whispered, taking a careful sip of the tea. The warmth was comforting, but it didn't chase away the restlessness in my mind. We sat in silence for a while, letting the quiet wrap around us like a thin, protective blanket. Outside, the wind had picked up, rattling the window panes and creating a rhythm that matched the anxious pulse in my chest. Eventually, my sister spoke again. "Do you remember how Mom used to tell us that worrying never fixed anything?" She looked at me, her eyes glistening with the kind of nostalgia that makes your heart ache. I used to hate that, but maybe she was onto something. I nodded slowly. Memories of our childhood floated up, soft and bittersweet. Mom's laughter as she chased us around the yard, Dad's serious but gentle guidance when we faced small, everyday challenges, the way Marianne and I would lie in our beds at night, whispering our fears to each other as if sharing them somehow made them less frightening. Those memories were a comfort, but they also reminded me of how much life could change in the blink of an eye. A knock at the door startled me. I jumped slightly, spilling a little of my tea, and Marianne let out a soft laugh. "See," she said, a teasing note in her voice to mask her own tension. "Even the house thinks you need to be on edge." I shook my head, letting out a shaky laugh that felt more like a sigh. When I opened the door, it was just my father, holding a small envelope. His eyes met mine, steady and calm, though I could see the fatigue in the lines of his face. "This just arrived," he said quietly, handing it to me. I took the envelope with trembling hands, feeling the weight of it before I even opened it. The paper inside was thick and crisp, and the handwriting was unfamiliar but deliberate. I unfolded it slowly, as if each movement mattered, and read the words aloud: "We are doing everything we can. Please be patient. Updates will follow." My chest tightened, and I swallowed hard. It was reassuring and yet maddeningly vague, a reminder that I had no control over what was happening. Marianne reached out and placed her hand over mine, grounding me again, and for a brief moment, I allowed myself to simply breathe. Hours passed like this, the house bathed in the soft glow of lamps and the occasional flicker of streetlights through the curtains. I thought about how life had a way of forcing you into moments you weren't prepared for, how it tested your patience and your strength in ways you couldn't predict. My family's words, "don't worry," felt both comforting and incomplete. I wanted certainty, a promise that everything would be fine, but life rarely offers such guarantees. All we could do was hold on to each other and keep moving forward, step by step, breath by breath. Later, as I watched Marianne quietly folding laundry in the corner of the living room, I realized something important: worry and love often lived side by side. To care deeply about something or someone was to open yourself to fear, to uncertainty. But it was also a testament to the bonds we shared, the connections that held us together even when the world felt unstable. By the time I went upstairs to my old bedroom, I felt a strange sense of clarity settling over me. I sat by the window, the cool night air brushing against my face, and allowed myself to reflect. I didn't have all the answers, and the worry had not disappeared, but I felt a growing awareness that perhaps the real strength lay not in banishing fear but in accepting it, facing it with the people who mattered most by your side, lying in bed, listening to the soft rhythm of the night and the occasional distant sound of a car passing by. I felt something I hadn't felt all day, a fragile but undeniable hope. A hope that, no matter what was coming, I would not face it alone. That, in itself, was a kind of peace I hadn't realized I needed until that very moment. And with that thought, I drifted into a restless but comforting sleep, knowing that tomorrow, and the days after, would bring challenges, but also the unwavering presence of family, love, and resilience. The next morning arrived with a fragile sort of light, the kind that filters through thin clouds and softens everything it touches. I woke early, as if my mind had refused to rest, and found myself sitting by the window with a mug of coffee that had gone lukewarm long before I took my first sip. The house was quiet, the usual morning bustle replaced by a hush that felt both comforting and heavy. Outside, the trees swayed gently, and the faint hum of early traffic reminded me that life continued, relentless and indifferent to our worries. And my father joined me in the kitchen shortly after, moving with his usual calm precision. He poured himself coffee without a word, and for a few moments we simply shared the silence, the quiet bond of people who had faced enough together to understand that sometimes words are unnecessary. Eventually, he spoke. "There's news coming today," he said, his voice low but steady. "We'll know more by afternoon." I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. Even though I had known he would say something like that, the anticipation made my chest tighten in a way I hadn't expected. My sister appeared soon after, carrying a plate of toast, her movements careful and deliberate, as if each step could ward off the invisible weight pressing down on all of us. She smiled at me, and I realized just how much reassurance we drew from each other. Even in the absence of certainty. As the morning wore on, I found myself wandering through the house, touching familiar surfaces, the polished railing of the staircase, the small cracks in the hallway wall, the family photos lined up on the shelves. Each detail reminded me of a lifetime of shared experiences, of moments of joy and frustration, laughter and tears. And yet, beneath all of it, there was the ever-present thread of worry, unspoken but understood by all of us. By midday, the phone rang. My mother answered first, and I could hear the faintest change in her tone, a mixture of hope and concern. When she hung up, her face was calm, but her hands trembled slightly as she set the receiver down. My father took the envelope from her, opened it carefully, and scanned the contents. My sister and I watched silently, our hearts beating in unison with each line he read. Finally, he looked up. "It's more complicated than we expected," he said, his voice measured, but the tension in his jaw betrayed the weight of the words. "But we have options, and we're not out of solutions yet." I nodded, though my stomach felt hollow. The words offered reassurance but also reminded me of the uncertainty that still lay ahead. Marianne reached out, placing her hand over mine, grounding me once again. I felt a surge of gratitude, realizing that, despite my lingering anxiety, we were facing this together. The afternoon passed slowly. I tried to busy myself with small tasks, folding laundry, arranging books, and even attempting to organize the pantry, but my mind kept drifting back to the uncertainty that loomed over us. Every phone call, every knock at the door, every unexpected sound made me flinch, reminded me of the precarious balance between hope and worry. When the mail arrived, a small package caught my attention. It was addressed to me, handwritten in familiar script, and for a moment, I allowed myself a small thrill of curiosity. Inside, I found a journal, its leather cover soft and worn, pages inviting. A note accompanied it. Use this to write, to capture what you're feeling. Sometimes, facing your thoughts on paper makes them easier to bear. I felt a strange sense of relief. Writing had always been a refuge for me, a way to untangle the knots of my mind. I opened the journal and began to write, letting the words flow freely. My fear, my hope, the unshakable bond of family, and the gnawing uncertainty that had followed me since morning. Each sentence grounded me, helped me process the storm of emotions that had settled inside. Later, as the sun began to dip toward the horizon, casting a warm golden glow across the room, my family gathered around the dining table for a simple meal. The aroma of freshly baked bread and roasted vegetables filled the space, comforting and familiar. We spoke in low tones, sharing small stories and memories, laughing gently at the little absurdities of life. The tension had not fully dissipated, but the presence of each other created a quiet resilience, a sense that no matter what came next, we would face it together. As night fell, I returned to the journal, writing late into the evening. The words poured out, a mixture of fear, gratitude, and reflection. I realized that worry, though uncomfortable, was a sign of care, of investment in the people and moments that mattered most. And in sharing that worry, in facing it together, we were not weakened by uncertainty, we were strengthened. Sitting back, I closed the journal and looked out the window at the night sky. Stars flickered softly, distant and unwavering. For the first time that day, I felt a quiet calm settle over me. The storm of anxiety had not passed, but I understood that it never truly would. What mattered was how we chose to face it, how we held each other, and how we found moments of peace amidst the chaos. And in that moment, surrounded by the quiet hum of my family's presence, I realized that the real lesson of the day was not in eliminating fear, it was in embracing it, understanding it, and finding strength in the people who stood beside you. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the windows with a soft, golden glow that made the house feel warmer, more alive. It was a quiet kind of morning, the air carrying a faint scent of dew and the promise of a new day. I found myself lingering by the window, watching the world wake up, feeling the weight of the past days slowly lift from my shoulders. The tension that had seemed so unbearable now felt tempered by a growing sense of perspective, a clarity that comes when fear is faced and shared. My father appeared in the doorway, carrying 2 mugs of coffee. He offered me one with a quiet smile, and I noticed the subtle change in him too, the lines of worry still there, but softened by a calm determination that radiated from him. "Morning," he said, his voice steady. "We'll get through this." I nodded, sipping the coffee and feeling the warmth seep into me. Marianne joined us shortly after, her hair slightly mussed from sleep, her smile gentle. She carried a small tray with a plate of toast and a few slices of fruit, her movements careful but deliberate. "I thought we could start the day together," she said, setting the tray down. Her eyes met mine with that familiar green warmth, and in that glance, I felt the unspoken understanding we had shared over the past days, that together, we were stronger than any fear or uncertainty. The morning passed with a comforting rhythm. We shared stories from the past, small recollections of family holidays, childhood mischief, and moments of quiet triumph that had shaped our lives. The laughter that emerged felt light but genuine, threading through the house like a healing balm. Even my nephew, Jamie, seemed attuned to the shift in energy, his playful chatter and laughter a reminder of life's continuity and resilience. By midday, we received news that brought both relief and a cautious optimism. The situation that had worried us so intensely was not resolved, but solutions were emerging, and for the first time in days, I felt a lightness that had been absent for too long. My father shared the details with a quiet steadiness, explaining the next steps while carefully balancing reassurance with honesty. I listened intently, feeling a sense of empowerment in understanding the path ahead, even if it was not entirely certain. I realized then how much the past days had changed me, not in drastic, visible ways, but in subtle, profound shifts. I had confronted my fear, allowed myself to feel it fully, and discovered that it could coexist with hope, love, and resilience. I had also witnessed the unwavering support of my family, their patience and steadfast presence a mirror reflecting my own inner strength. In the late afternoon, I wandered into the garden, the sun dipping low and casting long, warm shadows across the lawn. The flowers swayed gently in the breeze, and I breathed in the scent of earth and blooms, letting the calm wash over me. Standing there, I felt a deep gratitude for the ordinary, everyday beauty that often goes unnoticed, the rustle of leaves, the soft chirping of birds, the gentle warmth of sunlight on my skin. These small moments had taken on a newfound significance, a quiet reminder of life's continuity and grace. As evening approached, we gathered once more around the dinner table. The meal was simple but nourishing, filled with the comfort of familiar flavors and shared stories. Conversation flowed naturally, a blend of reflection, laughter, and quiet appreciation. My heart felt lighter, my mind clearer, and for the first time in days, I sensed a profound sense of closure, not in the form of answers, but in the understanding that we had weathered the storm together. Later, I returned to my journal, capturing the events of the past days in ink. I wrote about my fears, the moments of tension, the support of my family, and the subtle revelations that had emerged from the experience. Each word was a testament to resilience, connection, and personal growth. I realized that life's uncertainties were inevitable, but so too was the power of shared presence, patience, and understanding. Before turning in for the night, I sat by the window one last time, watching the stars emerge in the clear night sky. The vastness above reminded me of life's infinite possibilities and the enduring strength we carry within ourselves when supported by those we love. The worry that had once consumed me was now tempered by perspective, empathy, and gratitude that I knew that challenges would come again. Life rarely allows us complete certainty, but I felt ready. I had learned that fear and love could coexist, that connection could carry us through the unknown, and that even in the darkest moments, hope could take root. And as I closed my eyes that night, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known in days, a quiet confidence that, no matter what the future held, I would not face it alone. And in that reflection, I finally understood the true meaning of my family's words, "Don't worry." Not because nothing could go wrong, but because together, we could navigate whatever came our way, and in that togetherness, find strength, clarity, and enduring hope.